author, columnist, editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com, talk show host, and conservative policy advocate.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. We've got quite the edition for you today. But please remember, Liberty Nation Radio is sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. We're very fortunate to have with us Liberty Nation's enterprise reporter, Mr. Joe Schaefer, and we're going to be discussing this last year just gone, and most significantly, the three stories that Joe Schaefer thought really shaped the narrative, the news narrative of the year. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. I hope you're ready for a conversation because I've got things to say.
Oh, dear Lord. Okay, well, we're starting this one off. All right, Joe. So it's coming up to the end of the year. It's a great time to reflect on what were the big movers and shakers stories of the year. And for everybody, they're going to be different. You know, some people will say, the quarter point basis cut. I'm looking at you, Mr. Andrew Moran, who's also on the show later, was the big deal. Joe, what were they for you?
Well, you know where I come from, and I think it is clear to the reader. I don't spell it out, but we've got very good readers, and they know what I do. I write about various topics, but to me, they're all related. There's a higher core. You know, it's like branches on a tree. So you're reading about the individual branches, but it's really about the tree. And so this is an interesting. I'd like to kind of start the conversation with this interesting point. I notice things, and this is related to what we're going to be talking about here. So, I'm on X a lot. I do Google searches for my articles and whatnot. I've been noticing these aphorisms, and they're meant to buttress the status quo, the establishment.
Sure.
They're painting the left and the right extremes as similar problems, and it's saying basically the center is normal, the center is good. So let me give you a quote, and because I want your reaction to it.
Sure.
You could tell me if I get carried away, but I think this is really subversive establishment propaganda is what I would call it. So I saw this on X, and I saw it like on a Google search. I'm like, I keep seeing this. Why do I keep seeing this? So this is the quote. This is a direct quote. Everything is a conspiracy when you don't know how anything works. You see what they're doing? I'm asking you, Mark Angelides. Do you see what they're doing there?
I see exactly, precisely what they're doing. They're trying to make you a perpetual victim of the Dunning-Kruger effect, is how that really looks to me. Everything is conspiracy when you don't understand how it works. So what they're saying is that it's your fault because you're not one of the elites. You're not one of the educated masses. That's why you think it's conspiracy, because you're just stupid.
Absolutely.
Is that pretty much your take on it?
That is my take 100%. It's just so great how it's the idea. It's so condescending.
Yes.
So you're too dumb to figure this stuff out yourself. So let us do the thinking for you. You know, that's exactly what it's about. And I would say strongly that the truth is the exact opposite of that statement. More people out there don't want to know how things really work, because then they'll have to confront uncomfortable truths, and that takes them out of their comfort zones. You know, not knowing what is going on behind that curtain, it gives you a sense of relief. It blocks your view, which you could easily pull aside the curtain. But I think a lot of people want that curtain there. It's kind of a security blanket for them.
That's the purpose of the curtain, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so you don't see the reality behind things. Yeah, I like the way you brought up the way that it's aphoristic speaking, because, you know, aphorisms, they're supposed to be like undeniable knowledge. Now, Friedrich Nietzsche was great for writing in aphorisms. But, you know, like you never cross the same bridge twice, right? You never cross the same stream twice. Because, and, you know, it resonates with us because it holds an undeniable truth. Well, what they're trying to do, or what the purveyors of these new aphorisms are trying to say is, here's a truth. here's a truth that you just haven't understood before, and we're here to help you. When in reality, yes, they're essentially saying you're just too stupid, so leave it with us. And it is, and I think our listeners really should do their best to go and read some of Joe Schaefer's work over on the page of libertynation.com. And you will see that it is very much a body of work, and it does have, as Joe points out, individual branches, but the trunk of the matter is really what's important there, I think.
Yeah. And I'd like to talk about that because it is a problem for me, and I'm not complaining. But I get called a bomb.
Newsflash: Joe Schaefer is not complaining.
Not complaining, but I get called a bomb thrower. I get called a conspiracy theorist. I don't like it. I don't like being called that. I do a lot of researchers. I bring receipts, and my take is not, wow, Joe Schaefer is great. Joe Schaefer wrote this. It's like, I want people to have this information. And they can make their own conclusions based on that information. Now, it's coming from a perspective, my perspective, but you take that information and you decide the value to it. But here is my key thing. This is crucial to me. Presenting as mere I got to read it. I actually wrote this down because it's so important to me. So let me look at my little cheat sheet here. Presenting as mere policy failure, incompetence, or incorrect political viewpoint, that which is deliberate arson with an attempt to destroy the national sovereignty and structural integrity of this country. For me to present that as just, oh, that's a mistake, they got the wrong political ideas, that's a disservice to the reader. I think our readers are more intelligent than that, and they realize that, look, the establishment is pulling something on us. So this is an orchestrated thing. If you don't see the orchestration of the last 3 decades or so, I don't even know what to tell you. So for us to present, and we don't do that, I think we're very good here at Liberation. We don't present it as, oh, this is a policy failure. Oh, these people, they mean well, but they're doing it wrong. No, these people don't mean well. They are trying to change the fundamental nature of this country. And so I get called a bomb thrower, but to me, it's a disservice to present it to the reader in any other way.
Yeah. So back to the original aphorism there. It was, if you think it's a conspiracy, then you just don't know enough about it. You're not well enough informed. And if we just consider just this last year, or even the last few years, how many so-called conspiracies there were. There's no inflation. There is inflation, but it's good for you. Or Joe Biden is sharp as a tack. That is repeated ad nauseum on every major left-leaning network. Don't believe your lying eyes, readers and listeners. Don't believe what you can see with your own eyes. Follow the narrative that's being constructed for you. Now, with that in mind, we're going to take a very short break, and then we're going to come back, and I'm going to demand from Mr. Joe Schaefer his top 3 stories for the last year. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio, coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm continue to be Mark Angelides, and Joe Schaefer continues to be Liberty Nation's enterprise reporter, and we are continuing this fascinating conversation. But now I'm going to have to nail you down, Joe. What were for you your top stories of the year? The year just gone, 2025. What are the ones that had the most impact? What are the ones that made you think the most? And which ones do you think our readers and listeners should go and hunt out?
Well, yeah, I think these are the ones that are not necessarily my favorite in terms of what I wrote, but just the most important storylines of the year and things that we are going to see in the year to come. And like I'd like to stress again, these are 3 totally different topics. But for the intelligent reader, and we have intelligent readers, you will be able to connect the thread. Again, branches on the same tree. Now, I'm kind of a dumb guy. I don't know how things work. And, you're a dumb guy. You don't know how things work.
Thanks.
That's why your British government doesn't let you think for yourself. Your benevolent British government won't let you do that. But let's try to see if we can maybe figure out how things work a little bit here. So my first article there were 2 articles I wrote about the Marxist roots of MS-13 and Tren de Aragua. I hope I pronounced that right. I believe I did. The Venezuelan gang. 2 criminal gangs brought into America these are military aged men and very oftentimes ex-communist paramilitaries. That was the founding stock of MS-13, came out of El Salvador, a country racked by revolution. These were communist militants who came to Los Angeles in the 1980s. And that's the founding roots of MS-13 in America. Tren de Aragua came from Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, and now Nicolas Maduro. Those were avidly Marxist governments. They intentionally sent these military-aged men to America to undermine America. It's like Castro did, dumping his criminals from Cuba into Miami in the 1980s. That's exactly what we have here. So we have communists. This is like not exactly the real deal communists on the streets fomenting this revolution. And I'd like to point out, I hope I'm not going too long, but this is a key point. I wrote an article about how the Biden administration helps fund this. And let me read my cheat sheet. And so I reported September 30. The Biden administration, under the elastic guise of climate justice, because this is how they do things, announced in December 2023 that it was giving a $50 million federal grant to a group called the Climate Justice Alliance. The Climate Justice Alliance was co-founded by Cindy Wisner. She is literally a veteran Maoist revolutionary. And so this is the key point. I don't want to regurgitate all of it, but she was part of an organization in the 1990s called Standing Together to Organize a Revolutionary Movement. So in 2004, this group, founded by this woman who Joe Biden gave $50 million to, produced a document called Reclaiming Revolution, and it shows how they intentionally seek to get young people of color in the cities agitated and worked up, and then direct them to socialist revolution. And this is the actual quote from the document. Together, Raw's political priorities and practical methods allowed the group to lead thousands of people into direct confrontation with the state. As the ruling class faced political crisis and people across the country questioned the system's legitimacy, Raw created space for young militants of color to express their outrage and develop radical views. So this is what we're seeing with these anti-ICE protests and whatnot. They are cultivating communist revolution in our cities.
Joe, I'm sure you're familiar with one of my favorite writers, a chap called Richard Condon, who most people know him because of the Manchurian Candidate, but the guy has 30 plus books. Now, I may be the only person who owns a copy of every single one, bar one, but I'm hopeful for my next birthday. But he writes political satire, and a lot of the themes of his books, The Whisper of an Axe, things like this, are about how it's agitations amongst the young people of color within the cities for the communist Marxist revolutions. And whenever I see these stories in the news or read your reporting on the page of libertynation.com, the first thing I think is Richard Condon. He wrote the book on this, and people are using it as a blueprint for their actual revolutionary practices, and it's a dire state of affairs. Before we run out of time, Joe, I got to get your number 2. What is your second favorite story of the year?
Okay, I could be a little shorter on this one. It was about DC and Baltimore fudging crime statistics, make it appear the violent crime rate is far lower than it really is. So I'll just give you the quick excerpt from the article. This is from the Fraternal Order of Police in DC, kind of spelling out how it works. When our members respond to the scene of a felony offense, where there is a victim reporting that a felony occurred, inevitably there will be a lieutenant or captain that will show up on the scene and direct those members to take a report for a lesser offense. Fraternal Order of Police Chairman Greg Pemberton told WRC in DC television. So instead of taking a report for a shooting or stabbing or carjacking, they will order that officer to take a report for a theft or an injured person to the hospital or a felony assault. That's it. That's simply right there. Yeah. That is how they do it. They are lying about the crime statistics in DC as our citizens are getting maimed, wounded, and killed.
It's an almost Orwellian destruction of language, isn't it? Where the we're recording these things, but the words that we're recording them with aren't the exact thing. Now, just a brief shock horror for you here, and I don't know if this is true, but I've seen it around. I've seen it around, and I do recommend everybody goes and looks into it. Is there's a new animation of Animal Farm coming out where the bad guy is a billionaire industrialist farmer rather than the pigs with their noses in the trough. Anyway, we will check that one out. Joe, just a few minutes left. What is your third big story for 2025?
I mean, one of the earliest ones I wrote, I think I wrote it the first week of February, but it's very telling. Doug Emhoff, the former second gentleman, husband of Kamala Harris, on January 27, 1 week after the Biden administration ended, Trump inaugurated January 20th. 1 week later, he becomes a partner in Wilkie Farr and Gallagher, a law firm that has represented George Soros in court on multiple occasions. And here's the key point. It's not the little stuff. It's not, where he's filing a defamation suit or protecting one of his DAs. This is George Soros doing the really dirty stuff. So here's my favorite part of that story. Wilkie, this was let me make sure. Okay, yeah. This is a shout out. Wilkie Farr puts the brakes on $10 billion suit against Soros. Screams the headline to a 2017 article at law.com. Soros was the target of a lawsuit accusing him of using strong-arm tactics to thwart a lucrative iron ore operation in Africa. So, this is Soros at his really nation-undermining, plundering best, and this is his go-to law firm to defend him. This is where Doug Emhoff immediately landed in his golden parachute as soon as the Biden administration ended. So, Joe Biden's auto pen, well, who's really in charge of the White House? Alexander Soros visited 30 times that was going on for a while there. Who really was running the White House?
Was that before or after his marriage to Huma Abedin?
Well, that the ties between Kamala Harris and George Soros go way back to when she was just starting out as a politician in the Bay Area. He was heavily involved in advancing her career in California. And to me, one of the things, and I wrote this 3 years ago, but it's amazing what she did as vice president. Just she, at one point, was attending the Paris Peace Forum, which is it's not just something Soros backs, it's a Soros project. The Paris Peace Forum, it's one of these international gatherings. So she's flying in her capacity as vice president to the Paris Peace Forum, and she has to take time out to tape record and address the Democracy Alliance, which is another Soros project, not something he's funding. His thing. So we have the sitting vice president of the United States tape recording her speech to one Soros project because she has to fly to Paris to attend another George Soros project. So this stuff all comes together. You see in my 3 articles, Soros, corrupt policing. We know Soros is behind that. And these communist, agitators imported into our country. And we know who's doing that. It's not just George Soros. It's the network, the blob, whatever you want to call it, that George Soros is a major player in, that really has produced all 3 of these phenomena.
Joe Schaefer, thank you very much, and Merry Christmas to
you. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio, head coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I remain your host, Mark Angelides. We're having a conversation with Liberty Nation's guru of everything fiscal, Mr. Andrew Moran. Thanks for joining us, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
So, you had a fantastic article out this week that will have a lot of people celebrating, I think. And that's news that Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, announced that there'd be some big tax refunds coming through for 2026. Before we delve into how that's going to look, by what mechanism are tax rebates due?
During early next year, during the early tax filing season, that's when a lot of Americans, I think up to 80 million households, will see tax refunds at that time. According to him, quote, very large tax refunds.
Okay, so what he's saying is that there are, and I'd love you to give me a bit of background on this. because of the legislative changes that have taken place in 2025, there's a retrospective rebate due because people are filing taxes after the legislation came in, right? Or they're
Yes, absolutely.
yeah.
Data already from the Internal Revenue Service. A lot of people have filed their taxes retroactively, and they have received refunds. I think the last number I saw from the IRS was about so far $100 billion worth of tax refunds have been handed out because the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBBA. And then heading to the new year, a lot of people can be happy that, one way they can combat this affordability challenge is have more money in their wallet, from working instead of being punished for their work.
It's before we delve a bit deeper into this, there's a couple of things that just popped into my head when you're saying that. One is that there's this, if you want less of something, tax it. If you want more of something, don't tax it, right? Promote it. And I've always wondered why, if you want more money in the economy, why do people insist in economies around the world? Well, let's raise the tax burden, right? It's a punishment not just for your work, but it's a tamping down on ambition, on growth, on speculation as well. Speculation is a major part of any economy, and I don't just mean on the stock market, but I mean, you're putting money into developing further revenues for your businesses. And, then it's like, well, I can either expand my business a little more, be a little bit, take a couple of chances that might employ more people, or I can hold out for the next budget crusher that's going to demand more taxes of me. Why doesn't the very basic logic that if you want less of something, you tax it, apply to work, Andrew?
Yeah, well, I think the income tax is probably the most egregious and odious tax on the books today. And after that, of course, would be the sales tax, because for the income tax, you're punishing the fruits of your labor. You're working and you're getting punished for it. The sales tax, it's a tax on living. I wrote a recent article for LibertyNation.com about the property tax initiative in Florida, how Ron DeSantis wants to abolish it. And the argument was that, well, if you want to talk about taxes, if you need a tax whatsoever, the least worst tax, according to Milton Friedman, that's what he called it, would be the property tax. And that's the Henry George argument, whereby if you have a property tax and that covers, the essential services of government, which is, firefighters, police, education, and that's it. But everything else aside from that, Calvin Coolidge called it confiscatory levies.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the income tax is just that's the worst tax. But as President Trump, he keeps saying how the tariffs are gonna help him cancel the income tax. But then you look at the government budget and you see how the income tax alone brings about $2.5 trillion a year. When you're running a $2 trillion deficit, how the heck are you going to cancel any income tax whatsoever? So on one hand, you absolutely would love to abolish the income tax. On the other hand, it's not realistic at all, because just look at this factoid alone. The quarter of all income tax collections go just to cover the interest on the debt. So how are you going to abolish anything? Plus, tariff revenues, you get what, $200 billion a year. So he wants to have tariff rebates. He wants to pay down the debt, and he wants to cancel income tax, all in just $200 billion a year. Or even be liberal about it. You can just listen to Scott Besant's projection, says, yeah, $300 billion a year is going to come from tariffs. That's still not enough to pay for the interest.
Sure. I think what he's getting at here, and I'm not an economist, so I don't know. And also,
always preface that, and then you bring up a good point after you see that.
Well, that's you see, that's actually a trick there, right? What you do is you say, I'm not a thing, so I'm going to give it a layman's point of view, and then you come up with something good, and it seems more impressive because you've said that you're not in this august body. So I think in England, what we do is when a party puts together a political party puts together a political manifesto before an election, it seems that they're not beholden to the manifesto, and where they get cover for that is they say it's aspirational. So it's aspirational. This is what we want to do, given the right circumstances, in the fullness of time, as Humphrey Appleby might suggest. from the wonderful show, Yes, Minister and Yes, Prime Minister, part of my Christmas watching. But with Donald Trump, I think what he wants to do here is there's like a three-pronged approach to his thought process here. Number one is there'll be tariff revenue. Number two, he'll stimulate the economy to a point where the tax receipts are higher because of that. Or there's just more money in the economy because of that. And number three, he wants to cut some elements from the federal budget. Now, of course, mandatory spending is 2/3. You can hardly touch that. Yeah, there really isn't the political will to touch that, unfortunately. But in that 1/3, that's a lot of wiggle room. There's a lot of wiggle room in there. And I think what he's trying to do is all three of these over the next 3 years. Now, again, like you, I don't think that's going to be enough to cover anything. But if he pushes full bore ahead with these, we might get somewhere beyond the aspirational and towards at least a minor stepping down of the debt that is strangling the American economy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to disagree because yes,
sure. No, that's
you talk about the Laffer curve, and that has proven correct over and over again. You saw that with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that alone led to revenues reaching all-time highs in recent years, reaching about $5 trillion, which that's a large sum. That's a large sum of money. But when it comes to the budget itself, all the numbers are not pointing to any substantial savings. Elon Musk has pretty much conceded that the Department of Government Efficiency did not succeed. It was a failure. Yeah, it may have led to, trimming around the edges. But overall, I mean, maybe it'll be different in 2026 when the full, Trump budget comes out. But overall, that's not going to lead to any substantial savings. You already see the first 2 months of fiscal year 2026, and the October-November numbers are, up like 80% from the previous year. So those deficit numbers are not coming down anytime soon. Interest rates still remain elevated, so that's adding to the interest payments. Also, the debt, about $8 trillion of debt will need to be refinanced next year, and that will be done at higher rates as well. So
sorry.
I guess our conversation has to do about the income tax, but you still need this. You still need these taxes to maintain.
You mentioned about the refinancing of the debt that's coming next year. What date is that? Do we know? What month?
Well, no, it's throughout 2026 because the government borrows every day. Yeah, because both government.
And when does Jerome Powell finish up at the Fed?
May 2026.
May 2026. So there's a proportion of the debt that needs refinancing beyond 2026. Now, when the new bod comes in at the Federal Reserve, are we likely to see a massive interest rate cut, or will there be will it just be more quarter point here, quarter point there?
Yeah, can I ask you something? How do you define a massive rate cut? How
like 1 point
at one? Do you mean at one meeting?
Yeah,
because that would cause chaos. That would cause absolute chaos in the credit markets if the Fed were to cut rates by 100 basis points in a single meeting.
Sure.
Even Stephen Myron, he's the Federal Reserve governor, and he was appointed by President Trump. And even he says we don't need to cut interest rates that much to support the economy. He supports half-point rate cuts. He supported half-point rate cuts in the last 3 meetings. But even someone as hawkish as Stephen Myron has not advocated 100 basis point cut in one meeting.
I mean, over a year, Oh no,
well, he said over a year.
I would take it at a single meeting myself, a single FOMC meeting. It's a point, and then watch the.
But I know the point you're making though is that once Jerome Powell steps down in May 26, whoever Trump appoints, he's going to be more aggressive at rate cutting. Fine, but remember, Jerome Powell or his successor only has one vote. And, I guess when it comes to Trump's point of view, he maybe have, two allies in Christopher Waller and Stephen Myron if he's reappointed in January. And I guess you could also say Michelle Bowman, but they've been pretty conservative in supporting rate cuts. But, all the other, if you look at the summary of economic projections, that's a quarterly survey of Federal Reserve officials on their expectations for the broader economy and policy. And if you look at their dot plot, 7 of them don't support any rate cuts at all in 2026. So, you may have, let's say Trump appoints Kevin Hassett, and Kevin Hassett's Fed, and he wants to cut rates dramatically, 100 basis points.
It's my guy.
He has to get the support of the 11 other How the people on that board of governors, or the Federal Open Market Committee.
Yeah, the FOMC. So we're not like to see that kind of cut, but we will almost certainly see some cuts if the economy and the jobs markets go as they are, which would mean we've got a lessening of the liabilities on the refinanced debt, right?
But so
Good.
I'm gonna have to say, on paper, yes, that would seem likely. Although the Fed is only forecasting one rate cut, and the market is forecasting 2 rate cuts.
Okay.
However, the way the Fed cuts interest rates, yes, there is an influence on the broader financial markets and borrowing costs, mortgage rates, credit cards, all that stuff. But the main influence is the Treasury market, the 10-year yield.
Sure.
I mean, you saw that in the last rate cutting cycle under Biden when Jerome Powell cut 50 basis points in September 2024, and then a couple more after that. And you saw the divergence with the Treasury yields surging while the federal funds rate was gradually softening. And so far, it's been flat when it comes to Treasury yields since the Fed started cutting interest rates. So that is a major factor. The 10-year yield, that's at about 4.2% last time I checked, around there anyway. So yeah, the Fed may cut rates by, let's say, 50 basis points. Let's say hypothetically 50 basis points in January, but will that lead to the 10-year yield falling below 4%? The 10-year yield is influenced by many factors. Yes, by the Fed, but also by fiscal trajectories, the broader economy, the labor market, inflation. The 10-year is a very powerful instrument. It takes four factors.
It's going to be quite the coming new year. Andrew Moran will be right back with you after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. And we continue our conversation with Liberty Nation's economics editor, Mr. Andrew Moran. Thanks for sticking around, Andrew. Now, you have a fantastic video out in your Swamponomics, it's called, playlist out there on YouTube and on the page of libertynation.com, and it's fantastic. Or wherever you get your videos, ladies and gentlemen. And you're talking about the U.S. trade deficit. Now, I know you find it hard to get excited about the reduced trade deficit, but this is a good thing, isn't it? Well, give us the details first, and then we'll examine the pluses and minuses.
It's exciting based on an economics thing, but on a realistic level, it doesn't. I don't get excited over it. But yeah, so the trade deficit in September. Reminder: it's October, November numbers are delayed because of the government shutdown. So the latest number was September, and it showed that it was the lowest trade deficit since June 2020. And if you exclude the pandemic, I think 2017 was the other lowest number. And it came in at $52.8 billion, and it came in below estimates of about $60 billion. And it was down from $59 billion in August, and then it was below the forecast of $63 billion. But anyway, so the trade gap was driven by a 3% increase in exports. Now, that was huge because it came in about nearly $300 billion, and that was the second highest level on record. And so that's astounding in itself. Imports were up just about was up less than 1%. So you can tell that President Trump's tariffs are leading to these lower trade deficits. So for MAGA Nation, for Trumponomics 2.0, these numbers are terrific. Yes, terrific, I should say.
Terrific. Yes, we'll put that in the subtitle. Terrific numbers. So there's a few elements to unwrap there, isn't there? So trade deficits, they usually come from a nation-specific trade deficit will come from a number of areas. Number one, either people are not buying from abroad, they're buying more domestic. Number two, the exports from said country are increasing. Or I guess number three would be the economy's in a lull and people just aren't buying in general. So this one, you say, is led by an increase, largely led by an increase in exports, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Well,
it was like pharmaceutical preparations, financial services.
Okay. Right. That was going to be my next question. So this is from pharmaceutical preparations and financial services. Now,
and metals too, non-monetary metals. Yeah.
That's. I mean, those are three big industries for the American public. Now, tell me why you find it hard to get excited about this, Andrew. I'm really
It's because, so a lot of people, because when you hear deficit, you think, oh, that's a terrible thing, like the budget deficit. That's a horrible thing to have as a budget deficit. So people who don't pay attention to this stuff like you and I do on a daily basis, they'll say, oh, trade deficit, that's horrible. But when you think about on a micro level, we all have trade deficits. I'll go to nearby grocery store and I'll have 100% trade deficit with that grocery store because they don't buy anything from me. I buy it 100% from them. It has no impact on, federal deficits or the national debt. Well, I guess you could make the case and say, okay, well, if I'm able to export more stuff, there are more businesses that are going to, get more revenue. But on a whole, there's not much.
I'd say that's a pretty compelling reason to
No, it's not. No, it's not much of a compelling reason at all. Tax cuts, that would be more stimulative for revenues than it would be for the trade.
It is the season to wish for Christmas miracles, Andrew. Tax cuts, income tax cuts, property tax cuts. Even though Milton Friedman was what did he call it in the last segment? Yeah, it's the least bad of all
bad tax. Yeah. But I will say, but I will give President Trump credit, of course, because his economic agenda, which voters obviously supported, and Besson talked about this with his whole 3-arrow growth, is that they want to rebalance trade. They want to reshore manufacturing. They want the rest of the world to be the customers and America to be the leading manufacturer again. So these tariffs are driving that. Now, whether it's persistent, whether it continues, that remains to be seen. Because a big thing with this whole reshoring of trade and the whole shrinking ice cube, as Besson called it, is that will this, I think Trump says it's $18 trillion investment from abroad and domestically, will that be realized? And if that is realized, if the whole $18 trillion, you're going to transform the U.S. economy. But of course, I have my doubts. I highly doubt the rest of the world is spending, I think Saudi Arabia, they committed $1 trillion, which is the size of their whole economy, to investing in the United States. So even half of it, even if it's say $9 trillion or $5 trillion even is realized, that's a pretty boost for the GDP.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of criticism of these numbers, and some of it is certainly justified. But specifically to the point you just made there, for example, Saudi investing in $1 trillion, and that's their entire economy. It's not as though they're cutting a check for $1 trillion, right? It's just
no.
It's a staged investment over a period of years, and part of that will be from outside investors investing in something in Saudi Arabia, which will then invest in the United States, right? It would be like investment vehicles that they.
Yeah, I would say it, but there's no actual agreement saying, well, these companies are going to be investing. They're saying, yeah, we're committing to it, as if they're just biding their time and waiting for Trump to leave. However, a country like South Korea, in their trade agreement, they're saying, okay, fine, we're going to commit, I think it's like $500 billion, and they actually passed legislation recently codifying that $500 billion pledge to invest in the U.S. economy.
Yeah, I think again, we did talk about this in the last segment, but there are a number of pillars to support this, what some people would call like a Trump economic fever dream, which, the odds of it all being perfectly set and perfectly stable and, everything happening by the time Trump finishes his time as president is unlikely. But I guess what everybody's hoping for, everybody who decides to eschew the politics of things and just hopes that the American economy does well, no matter which party or president is at the helm. I think what they're just hoping for is there's a good base platform on which to build. And for many people, I guess the hope is that these pillars will be so stable that, for example, like with the immigration, I don't think we're ever going to go back to open border immigration because Trump has shown that it can be done. I think what many people are hoping for is that the pillars will be so stable that whoever comes into office after Donald Trump, either on that year or 4 years down the line or 8 years after that, is they'll embrace these particular pillars. Andrew, it's been fascinating talking with you. Thanks ever so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'd like to thank our guests today, Joe Schaefer and Andrew Moran. And of course, I'd like to thank you, the listeners, for taking the time to tune in each and every week. And of course, wishing you a very, very Merry Christmas from everybody here at the Liberty Nation team. You are appreciated. Please remember, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation. And this presentation is no endorsement.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.